Welcome to another deep dive. This time, all about Angular SEO.
SEO for Angular apps, it's a thing.
Yeah, it is, and it's something that a lot of people struggle with.
Absolutely.
So we're going to really get into it today, and hopefully give you guys some actionable tips.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, you build this fantastic Angular application. It's super dynamic. Users love it.
Right.
But if Google can't see it,
Right.
it's almost like you didn't even build it.
It's like having a shop with a locked door.
Yeah.
You can have the best products in the world, but if no one can get in.
Exactly. Yeah, and the irony is that the things that make it great for users, that dynamic JavaScript.
Right.
That's what makes it harder for search engines to understand.
So where do we even begin with that? Like, what's the first step to unlocking that door, so to speak?
I think the first step is to understand that making it good for search engines is actually often making it better for users too.
Okay.
So it's not like we're doing this just for the Google bots.
Right.
We're going to talk about things like server-side rendering,
Okay.
which can actually make your app faster for everyone.
That's a win-win.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, but before we get to solutions, I think it'd be helpful to kind of break down, like, why is SEO such a puzzle for Angular apps in the first place?
Yeah, so Angular uses JavaScript to render content dynamically.
Right.
So unlike a traditional website where the content is kind of there in the HTML from the start,
Right.
an Angular app, it kind of loads the basic structure and then the JavaScript fills in all the content.
So it's like the crawler shows up.
Yeah.
And it sees like the bare bones.
Exactly.
It doesn't see the meat of the content yet.
Yeah, so Google's getting better at handling JavaScript.
Okay.
But it's still not ideal. It's still way better if we can give Google that content right away.
So it's like they come to the page.
Yeah.
And all the stuff that we want them to see, like the descriptions, the blog posts, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
All that's missing.
It's missing, and then there are other issues, like slow page load times can hurt.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. For users, too.
For users and for SEO.
Okay, so it's a double whammy. So we've got this problem. Google can't really see a lot of the content.
Yeah.
What do we do?
So one thing we can do is give Google clues through what we call metadata.
Metadata.
So this is like, we have our component decorators for our pages.
Right.
This is kind of like decorators for Google to say, what's the title of this page?
Right.
What's the description of this page?
And I know keywords are important. Do those go in the metadata?
Yeah. So keywords would go in the title and the description.
Got it.
And you want to use, like, Angular has services for this.
Okay.
The title service, the meta service.
Okay.
So you can use those to dynamically set the title and description for each page.
So instead of having like a generic title that's the same on every page,
Right.
I can tailor it to each page.
You can tailor it, yeah. So if you have a page about widget, you can say, best widgets, shop our selection, or something like that.
So I can make it super clear to Google what that page is about.
Exactly.
Now, I'm just thinking, and maybe I'm being lazy here, but it seems like it'd be easier if I just created like a template for that.
Right.
And then just tweaked it a little bit for each page.
I know, it's tempting, but you really want to make each page unique.
Okay.
Because if Google sees the same title and description on multiple pages...
So it's going to think of duplicate content.
Yeah, and it also, you want to capture the essence of each page.
Right.
To really draw users in.
Okay, so unique metadata for each page. Got it.
Unique metadata, that's step one.
Okay, but what about the bigger issue of Google not even seeing the content in the first place?
Great. So for that, we need to talk about server-side rendering.
Okay, this is where it gets technical.
It sounds technical, but Angular makes it pretty easy.
Okay.
So server-side rendering, or SSR, that's where we're going to use Angular Universal. And what that does is it renders your app on a server.
Okay.
So instead of sending Google like a blank page and saying, hey, figure this out with JavaScript,
right,
we're sending them a fully formed page.
So it's already in HTML.
It's already in HTML, so Google can read it right away.
Like serving dinner instead of giving them ingredients and saying...
Exactly.
Get you.
And that's great for users too,
yeah,
because now the page loads faster for them.
So we get that performance boost.
And we get the SEO boost.
Okay, so double win.
Double win.
Now, setting all that up sounds kind of daunting, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, but Angular CLI makes it pretty easy.
Okay.
There's a command to generate the server-side code.
Okay.
And then you configure your server to kind of handle that rendering process.
So we're not going to go into the nuts and bolts here.
Yeah.
But just know that it's a thing you can do.
It's a thing you can do, and it's not that hard.
Okay, good to know.
And it has huge benefits, so it's worth looking into.
Okay, so we've got metadata, we've got server-side rendering. What else is there?
So another big one is dynamic routing.
Okay, this is where things get
A little tricky.
tricky.
Yeah.
So Angular, it lets us build these really flexible apps
Right.
with dynamic routing.
Right.
But if we're not careful,
Okay.
that can create problems for SEO.
Like what kind of problems?
So you might have multiple URLs
Okay.
that all point to the same content.
Got it.
Or you might have URLs that are really long and confusing,
Not user-friendly.
not user-friendly, and Google doesn't like them either.
Yeah, it looks like a messy site structure.
Yeah, so we have to be careful with how we use dynamic routing.
So how do we do that? That's a great question that I bet we're going to get into in part 2.
We'll dive into that in part 2, how to structure those URLs.
How to make it all work. All right, well, stay tuned for that. We'll be right back.
So before the break, we were talking about dynamic routing and how it can be a little tricky for SEO. Yeah, I'm still a little fuzzy on how to actually make those URLs work for both users and Google.
Right, so the key here is to use the Angular router to create URLs that are clean and descriptive.
Okay, so instead of yoursite.com/12345.
Right, that doesn't tell us anything.
Yeah, exactly. So what would be a better way to structure that?
You'd want something like yoursite.com/products noise canceling headphones.
Ah, okay, so you're actually using words that describe what's on the page.
Exactly, so both humans and search engines understand what to expect.
Makes sense. Now, what if I have different variations of a URL that all lead to the same page?
Right, that's a common scenario with dynamic routing.
Yeah, like one with filters applied or coming from a different category.
Exactly, and that can cause problems for SEO because Google might see it as duplicate content.
Oh, I see. So it's like I'm competing with myself.
Yeah, in a way, but luckily there's a solution for that. It's called canonical URLs.
Canonical URLs. Okay, that rings a bell, but remind me how that works.
So basically you're telling Google, hey, out of all these different URLs that point to the same content, this one is the main one, the one I want you to focus on.
So it's like saying, this is the official version.
Exactly, and you do that with a little tag in your HTML head, real canonical.
Oh, okay, and that tells Google which one to prioritize.
Exactly, so you avoid those duplicate content penalties.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we talked about structuring the URLs. We talked about canonical URLs. What about that structured data thing you mentioned before the break?
Right, structured data. So think of it like this. If you were trying to explain your Angular app to someone who doesn't understand code,
Yeah.
you'd probably use analogies. You'd break it down.
Simplify it, yeah.
Right, structured data is kind of like that for Google.
Okay, so I'm giving Google extra information in a way they can easily digest.
Exactly. So instead of just seeing the content on the page, you're actually labeling it. You're saying this is a product name, this is a price, this is a review.
Ah, so it's like I'm giving them a cheat sheet.
Exactly. You're giving them a cheat sheet so they understand the context of everything.
Okay, and you said I can use schema.org for this.
Yeah, schema.org is like a standard vocabulary for structured data. So you can use their properties to describe all sorts of things on your pages.
So it's not just for products. It can be for articles or events or anything like that.
Yeah, pretty much anything you can think of, there's probably a schema for it.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. And would this also tie into the metadata we talked about earlier?
Yeah, it's like metadata is the appetizer.
Okay.
It gives Google a general overview.
Right.
But structured data is the main course.
It's the in-depth stuff.
Exactly. It's where you really provide the rich details.
I like that analogy. So we're giving Google this full, well-rounded meal of information.
Exactly. We want them to understand our content as best as possible.
Okay, now switching gears a bit. We touched on this before, but I'm really curious about lazy loading.
Lazy loading, yeah, it's a game changer for both user experience and SEO.
Okay, break it down for me. What's the problem we're solving with lazy loading?
So imagine you have a page with a lot of images.
Yeah.
And if you try to load all those images at once,
It's going to be slow.
it's going to be super slow, and users hate that.
Yeah, and Google too, right?
And Google too. So lazy loading basically says, hey, let's only load the images that are actually visible on the screen right now.
Okay, so it's like a just-in-time delivery system.
Exactly. So as the user scrolls down, we load more images.
So it keeps things snappy.
It keeps things snappy, and it reduces the initial load time.
And that's good for everyone.
Good for everyone, yeah.
So how do I actually do this in Angular? Does it require a lot of code changes?
Not really. Angular has built-in support for lazy loading through the router.
Okay.
So you basically define your routes to be lazy loaded.
And then they only load when the user needs them.
Exactly. So if you have a page with a big image gallery,
Right.
you can lazy load that whole gallery module.
Okay.
And it won't load until the user actually navigates to that page.
That's super smart. So I'm basically breaking my app into smaller chunks.
Exactly. And each chunk only loads when it's needed.
This is blowing my mind a little bit. It's so much more efficient.
It is. It makes a huge difference in performance.
And that translates into better SEO.
Absolutely. Faster load times equal happier Google.
I'm sold on this lazy loading thing. Are there any best practices or things to watch out for when I'm implementing it?
Yeah, so you want to think strategically about which parts of your app are good candidates for lazy loading.
Okay.
Usually things like large feature modules, pages with a lot of content.
Things that aren't needed right away.
Exactly. You don't want to lazy load something that's essential for the initial page load.
Right, that would defeat the purpose.
And you also want to make sure that those lazy loaded modules are optimized themselves.
Okay.
So you're minifying your code, compressing your images, all that good stuff.
So lazy loading is part of a bigger picture?
Exactly. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a really powerful tool.
Okay, so we've talked about structuring our URLs, canonical URLs, structured data, lazy loading. It sounds like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have, but there's one more piece of the puzzle I want to talk about.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that?
Monitoring and analysis. So we've implemented all these techniques,
Right.
but how do we know what's actually working?
Right, we need to track our progress.
Exactly. We need to see what's moving the needle and what's not.
I like that it's like we're setting sail on this SEO journey, but we need a compass and a map.
Exactly. We need the right tools to guide us.
So what are those tools? What should we be using to track our Angular SEO progress?
Well, luckily, there are some pretty amazing tools out there, and some of them are even free.
Even better.
Yeah, so one of the absolute essentials is Google Search Console.
I've heard of that one, but I haven't really used it. What's so special about it for Angular apps?
It's like having a direct line to Google, you know?
Okay.
It tells you how Google sees your site, what keywords people are using to find you.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah, any crawl errors you might have.
So I can see if Google's having trouble accessing certain pages.
Exactly. And you can even see how your pages are doing in mobile search.
So it's like a window into Google's brain.
Exactly. It gives you that behind-the-scenes look.
And that can help me understand why I'm ranking where I'm ranking.
Absolutely. And one of the coolest features is the URL inspection tool.
Okay, what's that?
You can literally plug in any URL from your Angular app and see how Google has crawled it, indexed it, all that good stuff.
So I can troubleshoot if a page isn't showing up in search results.
Exactly. You can see if there are any issues that are preventing it from being indexed.
That's a lifesaver.
It is. It can save you a lot of headaches.
Okay, so Google Search Console is a must-have. What else?
Another one I really like is Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, yeah.
It's a free tool from Google.
Okay.
And it audits your web pages for all sorts of things.
Like what?
Performance, accessibility, best practices, and of course, SEO.
So it's like a full checkup for my Angular app.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you a score, and then it tells you how to improve.
So I can see where I'm doing well and where I need to focus my efforts.
Exactly. And it gives you specific recommendations.
That's awesome.
Like how to optimize images, how to make your code more efficient.
So it's not just about SEO, it's about the overall health of my app.
Right. It's about creating a better experience for everyone.
I like that. Okay, so we've got Google Search Console, we've got Lighthouse. Anything else?
Yeah, so those are great for general SEO, but there are also some tools that are specifically designed for Angular.
Oh, okay. Like what?
So one that I like is prerender.io.
Prerender.io.
This one helps with social media.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because sometimes when you share a link from your Angular app on Facebook or Twitter,
Right.
the preview doesn't look right.
Yeah, it's like it can't handle the dynamic content.
Exactly. So prerender.io basically creates a static HTML snapshot of your page.
Okay.
So social media platforms can understand it.
So my links look nice and pretty when people share them.
Exactly. It makes a big difference for your click-through rates.
That's a good tip. Okay.
And then for larger Angular apps, I really recommend Screaming Frog SEO Spider.
Screaming Frog, what a name.
It's a great tool. It basically crawls your whole website like a spider, and it analyzes your site structure, finds any technical SEO issues.
So it's like an automated SEO audit.
Yeah, exactly. It can uncover broken links, missing metadata, all sorts of things.
That sounds super helpful, especially for a complex app.
It is. It can save you a ton of time and effort.
Okay, so we've got a lot of tools in our arsenal now. I'm feeling much more equipped to tackle Angular SEO.
That's great to hear. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Right. It's ongoing.
Yeah. So keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep using those tools to track your progress.
Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners?
Here's a thought to leave you with. If you could choose one keyword to rank for, what would it be? And what would you do to make your Angular app the absolute best result for that keyword?
That's a great question to ponder. It really challenges us to think about what we're trying to achieve with our SEO.
Exactly. And it reminds us that it's not just about technical tricks, it's about creating truly valuable content.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Angular SEO.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
Likewise, I've learned so much.
And I hope our listeners have too.
To all our listeners out there, keep building amazing Angular apps, and don't forget to optimize them for search.
Until next time.
Happy coding!